I can't. Clearly took from Avatar: The Last Airbender. I wish they were real. I wish they were my friends. Hi there, my name is Gabrielle. Welcome to today's video. I did have a little bit of a delay in uploading some videos over the past few weeks as I got sick and then I had a trip for my job, so I'm excited to be back filming and sharing all the good stuff. So I figured I would go ahead and share with you all the books that I read throughout October. I'm gonna do my best as I go through to not give any spoilers. The previous book overviews and recommendations that I've provided, I would say are pretty spoilery because I do, like to give a full rundown of the story. But for these, I'm gonna keep it brief, keep it general, because a lot of them I know are popular right now, and so I don't wanna ruin anything for anyone. But if you are looking for some recommendations, these are ones for you. I'm not gonna delay too much, so I'll go ahead and jump right in with the first book. This month was filled with a lot of gems, a lot of not so great books, but some that are just going to be with me forever that I absolutely love. The first book, I might do an entire separate video about this book, but it is Air Awakens by Elise Kova. Air Awakens is the first within a series. I think there are like 5 books or so, and it follows the character of Vala. It is fantasy. She is an apprentice at the Imperial Library, so at the Imperial Palace of her world. I don't know if it even mentioned what the world's name is. If so, I'm forgetting because this was the very first one I read. And so yeah, it follows Vala's journey as a library apprentice. And she quickly discovers, so I don't think of this as a spoiler, that she is a sorcerer because sorcerers are in this society. They harness powers of the 4 elements: air, earth, water, and fire. Oh, it took me a second there. And so she finds out that she is a sorcerer early on, and it's kind of her journey of learning what these powers mean, some love interest action, and navigating life, being on the Imperial grounds with the Imperial family and royal family. So present, there's a lot of conflict that comes up. It's left very open-ended because it is, like I said, a longer series. But overall, I might do a book about this because of how many similarities and the inspiration that Elise Kova clearly took from Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'll dive into that another time. I did rate this book a 1 star. I was very disappointed. I love the cover art, but the story just was not my favorite. The second book that I read, which I will spoil, I also gave 1 star, was Gilded by Marissa Mayer. This one, even if I wanted to spoil it for you, I couldn't because this was my first DNF. I read, I think, up to 20% of this, but essentially it's a retelling of the Rumpelstiltskin story. It follows our lead character, Cyrilda, who has an interesting life in her town where she always wants things to be more whimsical and great than they are because they live in more of a poor town where there are very few choices of what you can do with your life. And so she resorts to lying and making up stories. And so it's kind of her journey on navigating that within a small town, people not believing her. And then of course Rumpelstiltskin comes in at some point. I did get up to the point where she goes to meet Rumpelstiltskin, but yeah, I just did not enjoy it. I did not like Cyrilda one bit, and I didn't feel the need to continue on. So I was kind of sad about that. The third book that I read, which I read for a book club that I'm in person, was The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This series is crazy raved about all over social media because I think the 3rd book in the trilogy just recently came out, and then the author announced that she's doing another book in the same universe. I'm not sure if it's technically within the series or if it's just about the characters, but my book club, they chose this book, and so I read it. Now, The Inheritance Games follows our lead character, Avery. Love that name. And she is a teenager living in, I want to say, Connecticut. Her mom passed away, and she has a dad who was never present, so he's basically not in the picture. And she has one half sister who shares that same dad, who she lives with and is kind of like her guardian. I believe her sister is older than teenage age, but like young 20s. And so Avery goes to high school. I think she was in 10th grade, and she also works to, live. One day, this boy, also a teenager, comes to her high school and essentially says, you need to come to this will reading from my grandpa who died. You're listed as one of the people who needs to be there. And thus starts the journey of Avery mysteriously being summoned to the will reading of this billionaire from Texas. I think it said he was like the 9th wealthiest man in the United States in the book. He goes to the will reading, and it's very on in the book, so again, this isn't really a spoiler, but at the will reading, it's revealed that the grandpa who passed away, he left a few $100,000 of his funds to his 4 grandsons. He left some to his daughters, more money to his personal guard and like the staff that were at his house. And then all remaining funds, including properties, companies, etc., he gave to Avery. She's never met this man. She has no idea why. And then it starts the main story. The grandpa that died, he was like known for loving riddles, and he would raise his grandsons always solving these, mysteries and clues. The whole story is about the 4 grandsons and Avery kind of attempting to solve these riddles and figure out how she's involved in this, how their grandfather knew about her, why he left her the money. And of course, there's some fun antics and a story thrown in. That's mandatory. I was so hopeful for this book. I didn't totally love it though. I did give it a 2-star, mostly because I found it very predictable. I didn't think that the clues that they were solving were all that difficult or, it didn't necessarily elicit any feeling of like suspense for me. And like I said, it was predictable, but ultimately the riddle that they do solve, there's supposed to be more to solve, which is why the series continues. But the riddle that they solve in this book, I predicted at the beginning, and the entire journey that they went through to me was pointless. So I will say, if you do like a simple, like easy read, that is a little bit more on like the riddle, mystery side, not necessarily thriller, but if you like more of like a mystery, I would recommend it, but it didn't fully do it for me. The next book that I read was Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 6th book within the Throne of Glass series, and it follows one of the main characters, Kael Westfall. Okay, wait. So this is a spoiler warning for the Throne of Glass series. So if you're just starting it, maybe skip this book specifically, because when I say what it's about, it will be a spoiler for the previous books in the series, though it's not a spoiler for this book specifically. So again, if you're reading Throne of Glass, skip Tower of Dawn. At the end of the previous book, he has a spinal injury, so he can no longer walk. So it follows his journey to the southern continent of their world, where he goes to the Torre Chesme, which is where the infamous healers live in their world. And so he goes because he needs the most skilled healers to heal him and heal his legs so he can hopefully walk again and fight in the big battle that the series is about. This book is claimed by some to not be essential to the series. Some people say that when you're reading Throne of Glass, you don't need to read this book. Since it is my first time reading through the series overall, I did want to read it. And ultimately, I am glad I did. I did give it a 3-star. And I wouldn't recommend that you pick up any book within this series randomly. It's definitely a must read through in order. But for anyone that's reading through the series, I would definitely recommend to read it, especially if it is your first time. Though I will say it is a bit more of a skimmable book. It is quite long at about 668 pages, it says, for the Kindle version. And I don't think it needed to be that long. I think it could have been a like 350, 400 pager and been really fine. It does include the perspective of Nesrin a lot. And this was the biggest bummer for me because she was just introduced in the book previous to this, and I just didn't really like her that much. I don't dislike her, but I just didn't feel any connection to her like I do other characters like Lysandra, for example. And so that was the biggest bummer for me. However, I loved following Kayal's love story because there is a new, love interest thrown in, as well as the mental journey that he had to undergo through, his journey to try and heal his legs. There is also some major information included that greatly impacts the finale book in the series, Kingdom of Ash, which is why, again, I would recommend that you read it. I was in a very Sarah J. Maas mood throughout October. And so my journey through the A Court of Thorns and Roses, or ACOTAR series, has been quite interesting. I tried to read the first book, ACOTAR, last year, maybe it was the end of last year, and I was not enjoying it. I was very bored. So I still need to reread that. However, thankfully, some YouTubers on here have created full in-depth, Carrie Cakes I think specifically, of Carrie Can Read, made a full in-depth plot summary of the book. So I watched that, and then I decided to read the second book within the series at the end of last month. So I read the third book in the trilogy, which is A Court of Wings and Ruin, this month. I really liked ACOWAR, A Court of Mist and Fury, which was the second one. People love that book and claim it's the best in the series, but I disagree. I think ACOWAR, Wings and Ruin is far superior to ACOWAR. I think people like it because it's where, two of the characters finally get together after building up some tension in the first book. But I really enjoyed ACOWAR, and I ultimately rated it 5-star, which is kind of crazy considering I didn't even read the first book in the series, technically. Obviously, I know everything that happens, and thanks to Carrie Can Read, she gave not just overall plot summary, but in-depth details, so I was not confused at who any of the characters were or anything. So I really appreciate that, and at some point I'm sure I'll go back and reread the full series. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this book. For the ACOTAR series overall, it is a trilogy, but it is still extended into more books, but the following books after the trilogy follow a different perspective than the first three, with the main characters and the primary one, heroine, being Feyre. So this book is kind of the final culmination with the, huge battle to save the world that all the books have been building up to. I'm not gonna give too much information, but I will say that I do want to do a whole video about this book as well, because now knowing that it's the end of the trilogy, what was supposed to be only a trilogy and is now extended, I have so many thoughts on how it ended. I will still say I give it 5 stars because I really, really enjoyed it and I loved all the action. And it makes me think more of Throne of Glass, which is why I love Throne of Glass more than ACOTAR as a series overall. But I have some thoughts. Right when I finished ACOWAR, I immediately thought of oh, this is how it should have ended instead, or oh, this would have been amazing, because it kind of felt like there should have been more. Yeah, I think there could have been more books from Feyre's perspective. And so I'll share my alternative ending ideas in another video. The next book that I read was another popular one, Kingdom of the Wicked by, I believe it's pronounced Carrie Maniscalco. Excuse me if I'm incorrect. But this was a popular one because, again, I think the third book within the series was just recently released, similar to Inheritance Games. And the cover was really cute, so I was like, ooh, let me check it out. It's October, spooky season, you know, let me see what it's all about. The premise sounds really interesting. I know I've mentioned before, I usually don't even read the synopsis of books before I read them. I just jump right in based on the cover or, you know, based on if people really enjoy it. So I jumped into this one, borrowed it from the library on my Kindle, tried it out. It follows a story of Emilia, who is a twin with her sister Vittoria, and they both live in Italy. And in the world, they are witches of sorts. In this world, the witches are known to have complicated relationships with the princes of hell, who are called the Wicked. At the beginning of the book, there is this crazy situation that happens where Emilia finds Vittoria killed, and there's a man there hovering over her, like licking her blood off his fingers. So the whole book is the journey for Emilia to identify who killed her twin sister Vittoria. She has to make a deal with one of these princes of hell, one of the wicked, and then it's kind of their journey. They have to meet various princes and solve, you know, they're all very manipulative as princes of hell, and they each kind of have a domain, so they're like trying to convince her to join their efforts. And overall, I thought the premise was really interesting. I would have liked it. However, I did ultimately give this one a 1 star as well, which I was bummed about. It wasn't necessarily that there was bad writing, I just found it a bit boring and kind of confusing at times. I think it was trying to do a lot. There was a lot of different magic that she could use as a witch, the intricacies of hell, and, you know, working with various princes. And then of course, you know, there's always a love story. So the love story that was involved was just it just didn't intrigue me at all. So I was very disappointed. At one point, I was mostly just like skimming through it. I wasn't really fully ingesting all the information. I just wasn't enjoying it. Like I said, for the ACOWAR series, it is a trilogy, but it is continuing on with some more books from Sarah J. Maas within the same universe. So I did read the 4th book in the series, A Court of Silver Flames. This book follows the perspective of our previous main character, Feyre's oldest sister, Nesta. After the ending of Court of Rings and Ruin? So many of Courts of. After the ending of ACOWAR, Nesta is undergoing a lot of mental turmoil. Big spoiler alert for the ending of the previous book, but after their dad was killed, she has just a lot of pent-up anger over being thrown in the cauldron, her dad dying and not really getting any proper, you know, closure with him. She is just going through it. And so this book is kind of her journey to get out of that. There's a lot of learning about new villains that are in the universe and trying to find these few objects in order to prevent the villains from grabbing them first. And this is still the inner circle that's in the previous books. They're involved in this, but it's mostly her. And then she is sent to the House of Wind by Feyre and Rhys in order to train with Cassian, one of Rhys's companions. And yeah, it kind of just follows her journey there. I can't share too much. She meets some new besties. And yeah, this book was definitely more spicy than the rest of the ACOWAR series. And I think it's technically adult, whereas the previous 3 are young adults. Don't quote me on that. But I did give this one a 2 star. Looking back, I'm like, oh, it didn't feel like that bad of a reading month, but I'm like, oof, I got a lot of like 2 and 1 stars here. But the 5 stars, they just, the 5 stars make it worth it, where it doesn't seem that bad. But ultimately, I did give this one a 2-star. Sarah J. Maas, she loves her long books, and this one is no different. Still edition, this is 757 pages, so it is quite long. And the biggest obstacle for me was that I never liked Nesta. She was always terrible to everyone, and there was not enough redemption of her in ACOWAR to justify for me a whole book from her perspective being enjoyable. I think if she had apologized to Feyre for how she treated her growing up her entire life, maybe this would have been better for me. But because she was always terrible, never was thankful for anything except for Elaine for some reason, maybe that would have been better. And also, I never understand why she's like that, because Feyre is the youngest sister. If anything, the baby of the family should be the one you're the most protective over. But for some reason, Nesta just thinks Elaine's the weakest link and she has to protect her over everyone else, and she always views Feyre as the enemy. And I just don't enjoy her. She's so rude. And honestly, I didn't really love her in this book either. She didn't really make up for any of her actions. So that one was rough for me, but I made it through, and I'm interested in like the universe, so I will be reading the next book when it comes out. It is rumored that it may be from the perspective of Elaine, who is the middle sister of the Archeron 3. All right, 4 more books. So the next one that I read, it was Crave by Tracy Wolff. I have seen this in Barnes & Noble before, and I was like, oh, is it a coincidence that this looks super similar to Twilight, the cover? Now after reading it, I know that was not an accident. That was absolutely intentional, and I don't know why this was allowed. Maybe it was self-published at first, but Crave follows the main character, whose name I honestly don't remember, whose parents both die in a car accident, and she has to move to a boarding school in Alaska to live with her only remaining family, who is her uncle, her dad's brother, and her cousin, his daughter. She goes to move to the school about a month after her parents pass away, and thus begins her journey of living at this school. There are a lot of ominous people around, and from the comparison I made, you can kind of infer what kind of creatures actually attend this school, not just your regular students. And so it's a very similar book to Twilight, though I did give this a 1 star, and that is because the writing style of this book I found was extremely immature. Let me go back a little bit and give a bit more of a summary, but like I said, she goes to this school, she starts trying to do her classes, and immediately her first evening there, before classes even starts, she meets the most popular / scary boy at her school, Jackson Vega, and is immediately enthralled by him and just is obsessed and wants to be around him and tries to, be around him as often as she can. Though everyone is saying, don't go near him, he's dangerous. There was this boy who used to go to the same boarding school as them who died. And so part of it is kind of like solving the mystery of what happened there. But the primary story is this love story. And this book really bothered me because there was tons of repetition. It kind of seemed like a situation where the author, I actually don't know if this is true at all, but this is how it came across to me. It came across that she had no idea anything about Alaska, so she looked up and identified key things that are involved with living in Alaska and really hammered that in within the book to make people think like, yes, I know a lot, like I did my research, like I'm not just writing a love story, I want to actually care about the location, the plot, and you know what? And I would have preferred that she just say, oh, I'm going to school in Alaska, have it snow outside, and then do nothing else that was actually realistic to living in Alaska. Because what ultimately happened was the words altitude sickness were repeated like 200 times. I would have to actually do a search, but it was so annoying how many times the main character repeated, oh, it might be altitude sickness. Her uncle, the headmaster of the school, her cousin, the other characters were saying, oh, you need to rest, like you just got here, you might have altitude sickness. It's like, okay, we get it. You would think with how many times it was repeated that it would be relevant to the story, and I kept waiting for it to be, but no. Like, what? And one of the worst things for me was how the character was like, oh, the author was trying to make the main character so Gen Z, but it was extremely cringe. Some of the language that she uses are, okay, what does she say? I'm feeling hella awkward. Which, first of all, the main character is supposed to originally be from San Diego, and people only say hella in Northern California. They don't say hella down here in Southern California. But besides the point, even just saying hella in a book is kind of annoying. Ooh. There is one sentence I quoted in my review where the main character says, I give Jackson a WTF look. It literally says, I give Jackson a WTF look. Like, what? Why can't you just, I give him an incredulous look. I look at him in shock. Like, why does she need to be so, like, hip and, ooh, like, oh my goodness. I can't. It was really bad, I'm sorry. Let me stop ranting. Keeping down the train of books I wouldn't necessarily recommend. I really wouldn't recommend a lot from this month. I read Caraval by Stephanie Garber. And this one was a real bummer for me because this book is super raved about and I was really hoping to like it. It follows our main character, Scarlett, and her sister, Donatella, who have a super abusive father. Their mother left them mysteriously when they were younger. And so they're living under the, governance of their father, who is like a significant politician in their area. It is fantasy, so it's, a whimsical world. I think he's like the governor of wherever they live. And growing up, their grandma always told them, and it really stood out to Scarlett, these stories about this man named Legend and this Caraval that he sort of conducted. He lives on this island where every year he hosts this Caraval, which is sort of a mystery scavenger hunt to solve whatever the thing is to solve that year. It changes. The prize every year is that the winner gets a wish. It's well known that Legend is sort of mysterious. It's kind of like dark mysterious. And so Scarlett has been writing to him every year asking to get an invitation to go and see his Caraval, because he used to be traveling around to different lands, but now he is stuck to this island. I think he had like a curse set on him or something. However, this year that the book takes place in, Scarlett wrote to him, gets a letter back from Legend with tickets to go to Caraval. It follows her journey to leave her island to journey to Caraval. When she gets there, soon after, it's revealed that the goal of this year's Caraval is to find her sister, Donatella. And she realizes, because when she got to the island, she had been looking for Donatella. She's like, oh, we got separated. And so now she undergoes this journey to find her sister. I didn't really enjoy this book, and I kind of felt like I was missing something because it's very like whimsical and mysterious. And I was kind of thinking before I went in that it would be like The Greatest Showman vibes maybe. And it kind of was, though it was darker, but I also don't think it was effective at that either. though people rave about it. So I don't know, I wouldn't recommend this one, but I would say maybe considering it depending on the books you normally like to read, because some people are like obsessed with this. I just found that overall there wasn't like any proper world building, so I didn't understand like how anything worked in this society, who the characters really were to each other, like what they really meant emotionally. I didn't really feel even like a sisterly love between Scarlett and Donatella. So when Scarlett was faced with the journey of having to, you know, solve all these problems or riddles to find Donatella, I just didn't really like care about Donatella that much. And Scarlett's own actions don't really show that she really is trying to solve, you know, these problems to find her sister. Like, she was very confused, and I just didn't love the writing overall for this one. The next book that I read is the second within a series, though it follows a different character, and that is A Soul to Heal by Opal Rain. This just came out in October, and like I said, it's the second book within the Duskwalker series. Duskwalker Bride, actually. First book followed character Rhea, who was sort of viewed as a curse in her town. It is a fantasy world. So Rhea was offered as a sacrifice to a Duskwalker, who is sort of a monster-like creature. And he agreed to guard her town for, you know, hundreds of years if they give him a bride or an offering. And so because she was viewed as a curse, they gave her to him. But like I said, this is the second book. So this follows, it's the same universe, but it follows a new character, Delora, who is from a different town than Rhea originally was. A bit more of a secure and stable town. She lived a bit more of a regular life. However, it's quickly revealed at the beginning that Delora had recently murdered her husband and the lady that her husband was cheating on her with. Delora was a very devoted housewife. However, she had some complications within her marriage, having difficulty trying to conceive, and her husband blamed her for it. She also had gained a lot of weight since they originally got married, and so she was kind of depressed by the end. And so finding her husband one day cheating on her with this other young girl from their town, she was enraged. As her punishment, the men of her town and the father of the girl that her husband cheated with, who was like the main, you know, guard in their town, I'm not sure the title, they decide to throw her into the Vale. And now in this world, which there are demons, there are humanoid monster creatures, the Duskwalkers. They kind of look like how the cover portrays. And so the Vale is the sort of separation and clear distinction between where the demons primarily live as well as the humans. So there's, you know, the human area, and then you can go into the Vale, and they sort of throw her over a cliff, expecting that she will die. However, Delora gets pushed over and she lands on another Duskwalker. So the one from the first book is called Orpheus, and the one from the second book, he is nameless. Within this world, the Duskwalkers can gain more humanity, more understanding, more emotions, and understanding of their emotions the more humans they eat. And of course, humans hunt them because they don't want them to eat them. But this Duskwalker has eaten less humans than Orpheus has eaten. So he's a bit more immature, more naive, doesn't fully understand things. So it's kind of their journey of learning to understand each other, Delora navigating life, being shoved into the Vale after having her husband cheat on her, and of course having to face killing people and accept that. While she's also battling the depression that she had already faced being in such an unhappy marriage and not having any way to escape. And it's also the nameless Duskwalker's journey to, you know, he had wanted a human because he saw Orpheus and Rhea from the previous book have success and find happiness, and so it's his journey to, you know, sort of seize this opportunity. There are a lot of complex problems that happen within the world from both the humans and the demons, So there's a lot of interesting problems that they face. And I actually enjoyed this more than the first book. It's very, very spicy, so adult only. I would, strongly say that. But ultimately, I did give this a 4-star. It's so interesting with books how some things like you'll rate highly, but I wouldn't even like consider in the same category as other books I also rate highly. Like, Throne of Glass, the first book in the series, I gave that a 4-star. And this book is like nothing even, it's like a different universe, but I also gave it a 4-star. So it's just interesting, but really thought-provoking. Particularly Dolores' journey through depression was very interesting. And the last book, I might do a whole video about the series because, like I've said 10 million times in this video, I love the Throne of Glass series. And so the last book that I read so far this month is Kingdom of Ash, the 7th and final book within the series. I started the series for the first time ever earlier this summer. I think it might have been June, so not terribly long ago. And I was delaying reading this book for a few weeks now. I had read Tower of Dawn earlier, and I didn't want it to end. I love the characters and the sort of friendship group that formed, and I did not want it to end, but this book as a finale did not disappoint. I did, of course, give this book 5 stars, which I was so pleased to be able to do, because there's nothing like getting to the end of a series that you're obsessed with and being so disappointed. So thankfully, I was not. It wraps up the entire Throne of Glass series. It culminates in the largest battle. The main character, she, comes to realize who she truly is, who she truly has in her life. And I won't go too into depth because it will spoil the whole series, but it's just an incredible book. It is super long at almost 1,000 pages. So that was a lot, but I will say I was not disappointed. There's a lot of characters, in the friendship group, and it follows like each of their POVs. I think there's like 14 POVs in this book, but I was loving it. I felt like there was real attention to detail paid to the closure that the reader would have of hearing each character's thoughts on the end of the story and just wrapping it up so beautifully. Oh my goodness, there was some powerful stuff in this book. I was sobbing many a time. That's why I think I need to do a whole video about this book at another time, because it means a lot to me. I love these characters. I wish they were real. I wish they were my friends. I don't really know how to feel now that it's over. I kind of just feel a little lackluster, a little sad about it. So I'm trying to hopefully read some more books that pique my interest over the next few weeks, but maybe I'll start with some things that are a little shorter. Yeah, if you've read any of these books, please let me know. Let me know your thoughts, what you also rated them, whether you plan to read them. I think even if someone gives a negative review of a book, I say, you might as well read it. I like to do that sometimes as well, just because, tastes can be so incredibly diverse and so different, and you might like a book a lot more than you originally expected. That's happened to me plenty of times, and I'm looking forward to that continuing to happen. I was loving reading this month. When I got sick for quite a few days, I tried to watch a movie, but the noise was just too much for me, so reading was what got me through. And yeah, I'm really excited to continue. Got some interesting videos coming up, so stay tuned if you love learning more about book recommendations, especially fantasy, I will say. Those are my fave. And don't forget to leave your thoughts down below if you have any recommendations of books that you've recently read and loved that I might be interested in. Alrighty, thanks for tuning in. I will see you in another video another time very soon.